The Venezuelan government reiterated its call for dialogue with Guyana to settle the dispute over the border territory of the Essequibo. Russia and China join international rejection of bombing ordered by Joe Biden against Syria. And in China, 7 COVID-19 vaccines developed in the country have begun phase 3 clinical trials. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito in Ecuador. This is from the south. The Venezuelan government reiterated its call for dialogue with Guyana to settle the dispute over the border territory of the Essequibo. Venezuelan authorities reiterated their position after participating in a virtual hearing with the International Court of Justice, which declared it had jurisdiction to intervene in the territorial dispute in response to Guyana's request.
The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela reaffirms its commitment and good faith to reach a peaceful and political solution that guarantees peace in our region, and extends a renewed invitation to the Cooperative Republic of Guyana to take the path of direct negotiations.
The Venezuelan vice president subsequently pointed out that the International Court of Justice lacks jurisdiction to rule on the dispute over the Essequibo territory.
Venezuela has respectfully reiterated that it has participated as a courtesy, not as a participating party in these proceedings, and has expressively reasserted its historical position of not recognizing the jurisdiction of the court to hear the territorial dispute over the Guyana Essequibo. On the contrary, Venezuela has emphasized the validity of the 1966 Geneva Agreement to reach a practical and mutually satisfactory settlement for the parties through friendly negotiations.
After being declared a persona non grata by the European Council, the permanent ambassador of Venezuela to the European Union, Claudia Salermo, stated that the sanctions promoted by the bloc do not support a call for dialogue, peace, and stability.
If they really want to contribute to peace in Venezuela, to dialogue, well, sanctions are not exactly consistent with that message. So basically, I think that right now the ball is in the court of the European Union. They have to demonstrate that willingness to contribute to peace and the strengthening of our democracy.
These statements on the territorial dispute also came after the European Union decided to unilaterally impose systematic sanctions against Venezuela by applying coercive measures against certain Venezuelan officials. In response, Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza delivered notes of protest to European ambassadors accredited in Venezuela, while the EU's representative, Isabel Brillante, was declared persona non grata. The Venezuelan government described the sanctions as unacceptable and a clear act of intervention in the country's internal affairs. Moving on, municipal and legislative elections will be held next week in El Salvador amid rising tensions between the executive branch and the Congress. On February 28th, the people from El Salvador are called to vote to elect 222 mayors and 84 representatives to the Legislative Assembly, as well as the members of the Central American Parliament. The road to the election process is full of confrontations between the legislature and the executive branch over the past 2 years, promoted by President Nayib Bukele. The differences between both sides were at their first peak in February 2020, when the president militarized the legislative branch. This Friday, Ecuador's Health Minister Juan Carlos Ceballos resigned from his post in the midst of a scandal surrounding vaccination for privileged groups. President Lenin Moreno informed that the official had presented his resignation, noting he respected his decision and highlighting Ceballos' efforts. Ceballos, who announced the presence of the virus in the country, is being investigated by the prosecutor's office for alleged influence peddling after it was revealed that several of his relatives were vaccinated with the first doses of COVID-19 vaccines imported by the government. The scandal provoked widespread condemnation as the population awaits vaccines and suffers the consequences of the health crisis, which has seen hospitals overwhelmed and highlighted a lack of medical supplies. According to official information released on Friday, Brazil registered an unemployment rate of 13.9% in the fourth quarter of 2020. This figure represents nearly 13.4 million people. In 2020, Brazil had the highest annual average unemployment rate since 2012. The most affected sector was the informal economy, which in 2020 representing 38.7% of the country's workforce. Meanwhile, President Jair Bolsonaro continues to push his privatization drive with a bill for the state-owned postal company to become a public-private partnership presented to the Congress. The move came a day after proposing a similar measure for the electric company Electrobras. The bill must now be approved by the Chamber of Deputies before passing to the Senate and will also require the approval of the Federal Court of Accounts. This Friday, Russia condemned U.S. airstrikes in eastern Syria and suggests Washington does not plan on exiting the conflict.
We want to ask the US directly if they allegedly made a decision never to leave Syria at all, even to the point of destroying this country. Politically and diplomatically, it is very important for us to resume contacts with the US. We hope that the new administration will soon form its team for this purpose.
We strongly condemn such actions and call for Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity to be unconditionally respected.
The Chinese government also reflected its rejection to the U.S. airstrike on Syrian territory against alleged pro-Iranian militia installations. In response to the U.S. attack, Beijing authorities demanded respect for Syria's independence, sovereignty, and integrity. The Chinese government also called on all actors in the conflict to avoid actions that would worsen the internal war in the Arab country. Beijing took advantage of the statement to ratify its support for Damascus in the fight against the coronavirus. This Friday, China condemned a motion passed by Dutch lawmakers declaring that Beijing's actions in Xinjiang amounted to genocide.
The relevant Dutch parliament motion disregards the fact and legal common sense, deliberately smears China and crudely interferes in China's internal affairs. China strongly condemns and firmly opposes this. The facts show that there has never been any genocide in Xinjiang. This is entirely a lie of the century fabricated by extreme anti-China forces and is a ridiculous farce to smear China. Xinjiang affairs are purely China's internal affairs. China's resolve to safeguard national sovereignty, security and development interests is unwavering. We hope the relevant parties on the Dutch side uphold an objective and fair position, truly respect China's core interests and major concerns, immediately stop its wrongdoings and take concrete actions to safeguard the overall situation of bilateral relations.
China also strongly rejected the vicious intention of a few countries using human rights issues to discredit China.
We firmly oppose a small number of countries and institutions that ignore facts, fabricated and spread lies about Xinjiang, Tibet and Hong Kong in vicious vilification of China, politicizing and weaponizing human rights issues and manipulating human rights issues to interfere in other countries' internal affairs are the usual tricks of these countries. Their move interfere with and obstruct international human rights dialogue and cooperation and trample upon and undermine the progressive cause of human rights worldwide. History and reality have proven that China's human rights development has taken root in the country's soil and is serving its people, which has achieved universally recognized achievements. This fully demonstrates that China's human rights development path has been on the right track. The human rights situation in China is at the best period in history, and anyone without prejudice would deny this.
Israeli security forces repressed the Palestinian protesters in the West Bank city of Hebron on Friday. These clashes started after Friday prayers when Palestinians marched through the center of the Israeli-occupied city holding banners calling on the Israeli government to evacuate illegal Jewish settlers from the city. Israeli troops responded with stun grenades and tear gas. Palestinians stressed that the West Bank, seized by Israel in 1967, is the heartland of a future independent state, and the occupation as well as illegal Israeli settlements are widely condemned internationally. Police in northwest Nigeria said 317 students were abducted by gunmen on Friday in the country's latest mass kidnapping. Authorities added that a rescue operation was underway. Heavily armed criminal gangs known locally as bandits in the northwest and central Nigeria have stepped up the attacks in recent years, kidnapping for ransom, raping, and pillaging. Just last week, 42 people were taken by a gang from a school in nearby Niger State. In December, more than 300 boys were kidnapped from a school in Kankara. These boys were later released. On Friday, Myanmar police dispersed more than 1,000 protesters in the country's largest city, Yangon. Police officers tackled demonstrators protesting against February 1st military takeover. These protesters had gathered in front of a popular shopping mall holding signs and chanting slogans throughout the morning, even as the security presence increased and water cannon truck arrived in the area. The protesters fled, but at least one was arrested. Meanwhile, demonstrators continued in the country's capital with Buddhist monks and nuns calling for immediate action from the United States military. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said on Friday that he shared the Spanish citizens' rejection of former King Juan Carlos's uncivic behavior.
I'm going to express in a resounding manner the same feeling that the majority of the Spanish citizens have, which is one of rejection. I feel the same rejection as the majority of the Spanish citizenry against these uncivic behaviors that we are learning about in the media. And with the same categoricalness, I say that the current royal house, that the current head of state, King Philip VI, has marked a before and after in favor of exemplarity, transparency, and the good use of public resources. Consequently, the current king, the current head of state, has my full support.
Thousands of anti-government protesters rallied in the Georgian capital on Friday to demand early elections after the arrest of a top opposition leader.
The idea is broader. The idea is to defend Georgian democracy, to defend Georgia's freedom, and to defend Georgia's European future. And free and fair election, release of political prisoners, and stopping of political persecutions are very important elements of this freedom and political future.
Italy's Mount Etna has been active for the past 8 days, with huge explosions sending orange flames bursting from the crater as high as 500 meters. Mount Etna so far poses no threat to surrounding villages. From a distance, it looks like it is snowing orange balls as the lava spills down its slopes. Plumes of smoke have sent ash over the villages of Trecastagni, Pedara, Tremestieri, and some even arrived in the city of Catania, 35 kilometers from the volcano. Italy's active volcanoes also include Stromboli of the Sicilian island of the same name and Mount Vesuvius near Naples, which last erupted in 1944. 7 China-developed COVID-19 vaccines have entered phase 3 of clinical trials, according to the Minister of Science and Technology, Wang Xinyang, on Friday.
The Ministry of Science and Technology has mobilized the science and technology resources nationwide to focus on and make breakthroughs in 5 areas, including clinical treatment, COVID-19 drug and vaccine research and development, complete virus genome sequencing within a week, and develop test reagents which gain mark approval in 14 days. In addition, we have adopted 5 technological approaches to develop COVID-19 vaccines at the same time. A total of 7 China-developed vaccines have entered phase 3 clinical trials. 4 vaccines were granted conditional market approval, and 11 drugs and therapies were applied in treating the novel coronavirus. We have conducted exchanges and cooperations in science and technology with 10 working groups of the World Health Organization, as well as the United States and other countries in Europe, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean region in the fight against the pandemic, sharing the latest achievements and providing China solutions.
Argentina and Uruguay received their first batches of Chinese COVID-19 vaccines following 7 other Latin American nations to welcome the China-made jabs. An aircraft carrying vaccine shots made by Chinese pharmaceutical firm Sinopharm landed at the Buenos Aires International Airport on Thursday. Argentine Health Minister Carla Bisotti officially signed the emergency use authorization for the Sinopharm vaccine. Argentina will roll out vaccinations with the Chinese shots to priority groups, including medical workers and teachers, to ensure the smooth reopening of schools for the new semester. Also on Thursday night, the first batch of COVID-19 vaccine developed by China's Sinovac arrived in Montevideo, Uruguay's capital city. Uruguay will roll out its nationwide vaccination campaign starting on March 1st. So far, 9 Latin American countries, namely Brazil, Chile, Peru, Colombia, Bolivia, and Uruguay, have received Chinese vaccines. Sierra Leone on Thursday received a shipment of 200,000 doses of the Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccine donated by China to support the country's vaccination campaign. Health authorities in Sierra Leone said the vaccine will play an important role in preventing and containing the COVID-19 epidemic in the country. According to the authorities, this vaccine comes at a time when the Sierra Leone government is planning to vaccinate about 1.6 million people. Sierra Leone's Deputy Foreign Minister Solomon Jamhuri expressed his government's appreciation to China for helping Sierra Leone fight against the epidemic, and also assured that they will continue to work with the Chinese medical teams to combat the spread of the virus. On Friday, Ivory Coast received its first COVID-19 vaccine doses from the global COVAX initiative. The African nation is the second country to benefit from the World Health Organization's program. A plane carrying 504,000 doses touched down in the commercial capital Abidjan, paving the way for Ivory Coast to launch a vaccination campaign. By the end of this year, COVAX plans to deliver nearly 2 billion doses to over 90 low-income families and countries. To date, Ivory Coast registers more than 32,000 COVID-19 cases and 188 deaths. Turkey's health minister said on Thursday that the country aims to vaccinate most citizens above the age of 20 by the end of May.
We know that we will reach 105 million doses of vaccines in total by the end of April, and at the latest by the end of May. I am not saying this for additional vaccines like AstraZeneca and BioNTech. I'm saying this for the 105 million CoronaVac vaccine, which the amount is clear and precise right now. We think this will happen by the end of May, at the latest. What does this mean? It means the vaccination of 52.5 million people. This is for our people over the age of 20. Who can be vaccinated. A part of these people won't be vaccinated because they got over the sickness beforehand. When we look at it in total, we will be able to vaccinate 52.5 million people over the age of 20. On November 24th, we signed a contract with Sinovac. Afterwards, I said it was made for additional 50 million doses. A contract was made for a total of 100 million doses.
San Marino, a small independent republic in northern Italy, started its vaccination campaign against COVID-19 with the Russian Sputnik V vaccine. Secretary of State for Health and Social Security Roberto Ciabatta said the vaccination is conducted on a voluntary basis. Ciabatta added that vaccination will not be a requirement for Italians who come to work in the republic. The city-state reached an agreement with Russia to acquire 7,500 Sputnik V doses after plans to get European Union-approved doses from Italy got delayed.
I'm feeling good. I was very excited and my heart is racing. I'm really happy that I have done this first step because I believe health workers have to be an example for the population. This is a day of hope because the vaccine is the strongest weapon we have to defeat this disease, for which in fact we had only a few drugs. I would like to tell the citizens not to be afraid because after many days and months of waiting, finally the vaccine is here and it's an opportunity, the mass vaccination that we cannot miss.
Somalia is being hit hard by a resurgence of COVID-19 cases, with its health system severely strained by the latest wave. Doctors and nurses at the Martini Hospital in Mogadishu, which provides the capital's only virus isolation center, have continued working around the clock to try and save lives. Authorities blame the resurgence of the new variant of the virus. According to official data, Somalia's virus infections jumped from nearly 4,800 to more than 6,500 in February. To date, the nation's death toll stands at 218.
Coronavirus has come into the city. We need someone to stop it and give us medicine that gives us an immunity. Now you see I am sad today as my mother died, and you will see many others whose parents will also die. There are some rumors on social media reporting a much higher fatalities for the virus. I think these are politically motivated reasons, and it's impossible that we lose 200 people in one night in our hospitals, as is being suggested on social media. The truth is, in the past 3 weeks, we have lost about 50 people.
French government spokesman Gabriel Attal said that France has avoided for the moment a third lockdown to battle COVID-19. The government of President Emmanuel Macron is beginning to impose restrictions on a local basis. Prime Minister Jean Castex said the health situation in the country has gotten worse. He added that the more rapidly spreading variant that was found in the UK now accounted for almost half of infections in France. The Director General of the World Health Organization stated he's glad the UN Security Council has voted in favor of vaccine equality, but urged to waive intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines in order to increase production and coverage.
Voting for vaccine equity is important, and we appreciate that, but the concrete steps should be taken and waive intellectual property to increase production, increase coverage of vaccine or immunization, and get rid of this virus as soon as possible.
And with that story, we've come to the end of today's news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on our social media accounts. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For TeleSUR English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.